Five.
Good afternoon. This is Skeeter Harris with Mac Village Media. With me today is Kurt Schmucker. Kurt is the Senior Product Manager for Parallels and has been with them for about 2.5 years now. Prior to that, Kurt worked at both Apple and Microsoft for about a decade, working on and has written several books on object-oriented programming for the Mac, actually the first book. And you might also remember a product called Virtual PC, which was really one of the first software virtualization products that allowed you to run Windows and DOS on a Mac. And it was actually from a company called Connectix. And Kurt was actually the VP of the Mac division there before he joined Microsoft. So today, this is another one of our series on Hangouts, specifically on Windows with Parallels Desktop. Today, in particular, we're going to talk about using Windows 8.1 with Parallels Desktop 9 for Mac, and some of the experiences that that you can expect. We also incorporated some of the frequently asked questions that we've gotten on Twitter and Facebook in particular into this Hangout to try to address your questions. Also, this is live. You'll find the web link to it on our Google Plus page. It will be stored and available to watch after the fact on YouTube. But if you happen to be online and you do catch this, please join the Hangout. You can ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. So, Kurt, welcome.
Thank you very much, Skeeter. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Tell me if you see it.
Kurt, it looks great.
Wonderful. So let me just start. So as Skeeter mentioned, today we're going to talk about using Windows, just one Windows, Windows with Parallels Desktop 9 on the Mac. What I want to do today is to sort of give you an overview of what Parallels Desktop does for the Mac. And there we go. And we're going to cover things that demonstrate what's the current state of Parallels Desktop and Windows 8. So as I'm sure you're aware, Windows 8 is a dramatic departure from the previous versions of Windows in a wide variety of ways. And that means that for Parallels, because we want to fully support Windows 8 and Windows 8.1, we have to make modifications to our software, Parallels Desktop, in order to make sure the features that people have come to love over the many years that Parallels Desktop has been out there still work. And we also always want to take advantage of new features in the OS to make the best possible experience for our users who are using Parallels Desktop. So I'll talk about some of the unique features. I'll show some stuff in Windows 8. In fact, not only is the user experience different, but the way you would install Windows 8 or 8.1 in Parallels Desktop is a little bit different. And Skeeter will share some revelations there. And basically, we're going to focus on not all the features and an overview of Windows 8 or 8.1, but rather focus on the features that will most affect a user using Parallels Desktop to run Windows 8, and the features in Parallels Desktop that take advantage of Windows 8 or make it easier for our users to use that OS. So I'll do lots of live demos. As Skeeter mentioned, please do post questions, either now online if you're here today, or if you watch this archived on YouTube, please go ahead and post questions there on the YouTube page, and Skeeter and I will do our best job of monitoring that and answering your questions. So with that preamble, let me go ahead and get started in more detail. So Parallels Desktop has added a number of features specific to Windows 8 and Windows 8.1, and I'll be showing you those in my demo. I'll show you the fact that you can keep, for example, ordinary Windows apps as well as Metro apps in the dock and in the launchpad of the Mac, making sure we integrate those two operating systems. We have a feature we call Sticky Mouse, which we added because of the unique way in which controls are used, and in particular the trackpad is used in Windows 8. And I'll also show you some support for Windows 8 gestures in Parallels Desktop. Again, the whole goal here is to make this OS usable to a Parallels Desktop user on the Mac, and to bring as much Mac goodness to that experience as we possibly can. So what I want to show you now are things related to Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. So if we look at Windows 8, Windows 8 was a kind of dramatic change from the earlier versions of Windows. You see the so-called tile screen here, and you have tiles that will give you functionality in Windows. If that looks really strange to you, that's because you're probably used to something more like the desktop, which I can go to here and see something like the old desktop in Windows 7 or even earlier versions of Windows. But it's not exactly the same. And the biggest thing that people noticed when they began using Windows 8 was, hey, what happened to the start button I'm used to down over here? That's how I controlled everything in Windows. And the answer is, it's gone. And so that was a concern of many people. We'll get to answers to that concern in just a moment. But also, Windows 8 added some functionality that are invisible. If I want to go back to that page with the tiles, I can move my cursor down to the bottom corner of the screen and see a little thumbnail and then jump back to that. I'll tell you one little anecdote for me personally. I began playing with Windows 8 in Parallels Desktop back when it was an early preview for developers. And I'll tell you the thing that puzzled me the most. How do I turn it off? How do I get out of here? Well, it turns out that's sort of an invisible control. And the way you make that invisible control visible is you put your cursor in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and these things appear that are called charms. And you see those here. Now, for an ordinary Windows 8 user on PC hardware, that's not a terribly difficult thing to do. But for a Mac user that's running Windows inside a window, there's really nothing special about the top right-hand corner. Your cursor is going to go by that really, really quick. And in fact, you see here, one of the features that we really like about Parallels Desktop is the integration of the cursor automatically. Windows cursor, Mac cursor. Windows cursor, Mac cursor. And that turns out to be really, really important for the Mac user to have that level of integration between the two OSs. But if control of Windows 8 requires you to precisely position your cursor in the top right corner of that window, that can be a real challenge. So a feature we added to Parallels Desktop to support Windows 8 better is the following. You saw me move my cursor really fast, and it goes across that boundary between Windows 8 and Mac very easily. But if I move my cursor slowly, I'm still moving my mouse, but the cursor is sticking there. So we call that sticky mouse. And that makes it easy to do something like this, to get the charms to appear, to go down over in here and get a little thumbnail to appear like this, so on. These are examples of features we added to Parallels Desktop to make it easier to use for Windows users. Now this is Windows 8. In Windows 8.1, I won't have them both up at the same time just to not confuse anybody. In Windows 8.1, Microsoft made a number of small cosmetic changes. The biggest one you're going to see here is look at the tiles. Now I have big tiles, I have tiny tiles, and I can sort of allocate the screen real estate that I want according to what, for me, is the importance of that functionality. And that's really great. But also notice they took care of the question that I had before. They added a power off button right here. So I can find how to turn Windows 8 off or restart it or put it to sleep really easily. I didn't have to rely on that invisible control. They made it visible. And those are just two examples that differentiate Windows 8.1 from Windows 8.
Hey, Kurt, one of the cool things that they also did with the update 1 to 1.1 was they added more mouse controls. And one in particular that comes in real handy is they put the X at the top right-hand side of running applications to very quickly close them that was missing up to that point on the update. Exactly.
That's another example of a small cosmetic change, which was the the goal was to have a big effect on users and to make it much easier to use and experience Windows 8.1, and that's great. Let me go back to my slides for just a moment, and we'll talk about some more things.
And while Kurt's doing that, don't forget, for those of you that are online watching, I know we have a handful of people, if you have questions about the product or about Windows that tie to Parallels, we'd love to hear them. Put them in the ask your questions, and we'll take them and do our best to either answer them and/or demo a feature about the question that you have.
Thank you, Skeeter. I completely agree. I'm trying to answer questions for people. So, some other features that are quite easy to observe in Windows 8.1. As I showed you, the start screen, the tiles page, has more kinds of tiles, more colors, and as I'll show you in a moment in a screenshot, you can actually change the background color. That's wonderful. There were lots of users who felt much more comfortable with the desktop approach to Windows than the tiles page. So Microsoft added the ability to boot to the desktop. And I'll show you some examples in just a moment. So here we are. Here's the Windows 8 screen with two kinds of tiles, big and medium. But in Windows 8.1, you could have really large tiles, really tiny tiles, and you could change the background color. And this made it much more personable, and that's really great. Related, they added a control. Go right to the desktop instead of going to the start page. And that's for people who felt much more comfortable using Windows in that way than using the tiles page with the so-called start screen. Again, these are good changes that were added. And they added two more things. So I'll show you those now. So in Windows 8, when you wanted to search for something, you brought up one of the charms here. Come on, charms. There we are. Search. And the first thing you had to do was say what kind of a thing you were searching for. Am I searching for an app? Am I searching for a setting? Am I searching for one of my files? And good idea, turned out not to really work for most people. So in Windows 8.1, they added what's now called OmniSearch. And that was just a single search button, much more visible, and you just search everywhere for whatever you're looking for. You didn't have to pre-qualify it and say ahead of time, oh, I'm looking for an app, I'm looking for a control. And that just made it easier for most users to get what they wanted more quickly. If I go back now to Windows 8, they also added something to the come on, let me take it back. I don't want to be in here. Get me back to the start page. Yes, go back to the invisible little charm. Come on, charm.
You lost it, huh, Kurt?
I guess so.
I'm looking for it myself. I don't see it.
I'm stuck. Ah, there we are. Well, not really. I want to get out of here and go back to...
Can you go back to your start menu?
That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. All right. Didn't mean to start Excel, but at least that got us out of there. So
there you
that's
go.
Great. And now we can go back to the start page. Come on, start page. All right. Wow, I've lost control here.
Gotta love it when demos work the way you want them to, right?
Yeah. I am stuck.
Can you get back to what if you hit the what is it, the option key?
Nothing for me. Okay.
Well,
so
I keep going.
I guess the point here is the start menu and the start button that people were so familiar with and enamored with is just gone. So what they did in Windows 8.1 is when you go to the desktop, there is a start button, and that's wonderful. Unfortunately, all it does is take you back to the start screen. It doesn't give you the start menu that everybody wanted. So I'll come back to that in a moment. This is what Microsoft did. So they made a number of changes. Not all the changes were things that people were asking for exactly, or they sort of took a request and gave you something different in response to it. Let me go back to my slides.
Hey,
So
Kurt, if
yes,
you'd like, I'll be happy to show my screen that actually has the Parallels 9 version of a start menu.
we're getting there. We're getting
Okay.
there. Okay, so those are two things that were added, and that's great. Now, as I mentioned, it was also different the way you would install a Windows 8 virtual machine in Parallels Desktop. Now you can see here in my virtual machine list, I have a bunch of operating systems ready to run. This is much more, these are many more machines than the average user would ever have, but I'm an unusual user. But suppose you were using Windows 7 and you really wanted to use Windows 8.1. Well, how do you get it? Well, the normal way you would install a new Windows operating system in Parallels Desktop would be to get a DVD, or at least an ISO. An ISO is a computer file that kind of can pretend it's a DVD, and you would install it just like you were installing Windows on a hardware PC. And in fact, Parallels Desktop has a wizard. It helps that installation take place even easier, and that's great. But you had to have that DVD. And that's a problem because those two formats, DVD and ISO, were not so easy to obtain for Windows 8.1. So Skeeter did some investigations and found some ways to get you to that ISO that would make it easy for you to install. I'm going to let Skeeter talk about what he found out, which is really great.
Okay, so to jump in, so there's really two options. And the first challenge is, how do you get an ISO to install Windows 8.1 or even Windows 8 for that matter into your Mac using Parallels Desktop 9? Well, you have to get that ISO. And Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, assumes that everybody has a PC. Therefore, they don't make it easy for you to go out and get an ISO. And even if you go to your local Best Buy or order off of an Amazon .com website, you're still going to end up with a DVD and a product key that's not going to be useful if you have a MacBook Air or one of the new MacBook Retinas without a super drive that you don't want to have to go out and obviously spend the $80 to get. So what I found was in the screen, hopefully that you can see on my computer right now, what you're seeing is the URL is basically Microsoft's product update website. That if you look at this, what you can do, and the web address is Windows 8 upgrade product key only, and we'll put this in the Google Hangout in the text below so you can get to it directly. But basically, this allows you to download the ISO file in a Windows setup, either for Windows 8.1 or Windows 8, and it does require a product key. So you would either have to go to the Microsoft online store and buy the product key, or of course, if you have that physical DVD, it of course comes with a product key. And what you're going to do is you're actually going to click on a small program, and what this program will do is it will actually download an executable. You'll see it run here in a minute. And then what you're going to do is once you run this, of course, I think I may have it running, so let me go back and start this again here. But basically what it's going to do at this point is it's going to prompt me for my product key. Once I get that product key, I enter it, which of course I don't want to show you my product key, but once you enter it, you click Next, and it will download a runnable version, at least a bootable version of 8.1, to the point that, Kurt, if you go back to your next slide, so everybody online can see it.
Yep.
What this will do is this will give you the opportunity then at that point to basically, first off, select whether you want to install it directly within a Windows environment, or actually if you click on the button that says install by creating media, which is the second button down, you're then prompted to either install to USB flash drive or an ISO file. And you want to select the ISO file. It will download approximately a 3.2, 3.4 gigabyte file, and then you'll use that to actually then install Parallels Desktop 9 using Parallels Desktop's install wizard. That will a little bit of effort, but that will get you up and running with Windows 8.1 or 8. One of the caveats that you saw is you do have to be running Windows. So if you don't have access to Windows, maybe you can use a computer at your office or a friend that has a Windows computer, but you'll need to do that in order to get Windows in order to download an ISO of Windows. Now, Kurt, do you want to explain an alternative approach that takes a little bit different path but will accomplish the same thing?
Yes, I shall. So thank you, Skeeter, and thank you for figuring out and doing spelunking on the Microsoft site to find this example. I'll have to admit, I tried to find such a thing and I failed. So congratulations to you.
Well, Kurt, I can tell you that we see an awful lot of questions on the support forums and along with the Twitter Parallels account, which is why I wanted to bring it up. And actually, before we go any further, Kurt, we do have a question. I'm going to select this. This is from Jason Ward. Jason said, did you forget to mention that you have to log into a Microsoft account to get that link? Jason, actually, in my experience, in fact, I just tried this, you actually don't have to log in. As long as you have a product key, you can just click on that link and download it without having the actual Microsoft account in order to get into it. At least that's what I've personally seen. Kurt, I don't know if you have any different experience of that.
I have not, but having a Microsoft account is free, and it's useful for other things too, like support questions or posting things on their forums, so it's not a bad thing to have. And basically you're just tying a live ID to your email address, and then you have to remember that password, and which is my particular weakness. But once you do, that opens up a whole bunch of things on the Microsoft site for you. So I wouldn't shy away too much from having a live ID associated with your email account.
Yeah, good point, Jason. Jason saying it made him log in. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but at least the link that I found, Jason, I didn't need it because it assumed I had a product key, and maybe the difference here, Jason, was in order for me to click on those links that I showed earlier that are on Kurt's slides here, I actually had to put in a valid key before it would even allow me to download the ISO files. So that may be the difference that you're saying. Not 100% sure. Kurt, why don't you jump back in?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a totally different way of getting making use of the approach that Skeeter talked about, and that is, it turns out a group at Microsoft is making available trials of various versions of Windows, including Windows 8.1, and they're 90-day trials, but 90 days is a long time, and so that's really great. But even better, they actually take that Windows 8.1 and install it in a Parallels virtual machine. So you may not realize, but each of these machines here you see on my desktop, there's a file on my Mac, a very large file, it turns out, PVM file, that is the container for Windows and all your Windows applications. So what this Microsoft team has done, the modern IE team, is they've actually done that work for you. So you're actually downloading a pre-installed version of Windows 8.1 in the exact format needed for Parallels Desktop. And that's really great. And so I want to applaud them for doing so. They actually have a wide variety of Microsoft Windows versions available in these formats. And so you can pick the one you want to use. But I focused here on the Windows 8.1. And when you do so, what you'll end up doing is you can follow the instructions that I put into a KB that I wrote that's on the Parallels website that tells you exactly how to get these files, how to download them, and how to put them into Parallels Desktop. Now, for a variety of technical reasons, these files are pretty large, so Microsoft very wisely divided them into chunks, so in case your download, sort of hiccups during the middle, you don't lose all your work. And so you actually end up downloading 4 files a total of about 3.6 gigabytes. So it's a non-trivial download for most people. And then you basically glue them together with the techniques I documented in the KB article. And at the end, you have a virtual machine ready to use in Parallels. And I show you in that KB article also how to install that. The only amount of time here is the download. The rest of it really just takes a few minutes. So I've done this. I did it again just before this event, double-checked things hadn't changed. And so this is a really great way to try out Windows 8.1 and to then have a Windows environment into which you can create an ISO and use the instructions that Skeeter found to get the file you need to install Windows 8.1, a purchased copy. Now, as I mentioned in my previous slide, I showed you, but didn't actually talk about, this is actually a trial of Windows 8.1, and there's no way to convert this to being a full licensed trial. There's no way to pay Microsoft any money to turn this into a perpetual licensed Windows 8. And that's the only real rub, the only real caveat I have here is what you're going to want to do. Use this VM, gain some experience, do some Windows-only tasks like the creation of this ISO that Skeeter mentioned, and then you're going to throw it away because it's going to time bomb at 90 days, then you're stuck. So you want to be careful that you don't, if you do any work in that VM, that you move that work out into your Mac, like documents you've created or things like this. If you install any applications, you want to keep those installers around on the Mac so you can get back to them when you actually have your perpetually licensed Windows 8 in a VM through other means. That's the only caveat.
Hey, Kurt, just a quick question on that. The trial version, do you have an option of selecting whether it was a 32-bit version of Windows or a 64-bit by chance?
I believe you do. So they present a wide range of choices. I think it's on the order of 10 to 15 choices.
Well, the reason I'm asking is you'll notice that I selected a question. Our friend Chris Carter pointed out, and Chris, thank you for bringing this up. I'd forgotten to mention this, so thank you for this. But when you actually run this installer off of that website that we talked about, which I think I've buried here on my computer, but be that as it may, whatever version of Windows you happen to be running when you actually download that ISO file, it's going to automatically select the 32-bit or 64-bit ISO and not give you a choice. And so, Chris, thanks again for pointing that out to everybody that's watching that follows this, which is why, Kurt, I wanted to know whether you had an option of picking which version of the perpetual, not the perpetual, but the trial license that you had there.
So my recollection is that you do, but here's what I'll do. I will double check after this Hangout is over and post that fact in the YouTube page so you can see it there. And for most people on a relatively recent Mac, the 64-bit version of Windows is actually going to be your best choice. It's going to run the best. But if for some reason you want 32-bit version, you need it for some compatibility with some old applications or something, that's fine. I'll double check that that's available on the Modern IE download VMs page and post that answer there. So I really have to commend the Modern IE team for doing all this work. As a person who's built many, many VMs, I know how much time it took to do all this and to have that available in so many formats and versions. And it's an enormous amount of work, and Parallels users can take advantage of it, and that's just great.
Hey, Kurt, I have to agree with you. I've used them as well. By the way, after you taught me that they existed, I never knew they existed myself. And you know what? They're a great resource just for testing alone.
Exactly correct. I've done the same thing. Suppose, for example, not everybody will be in this case, but you have an old application that only runs in XP. Or you need to answer a question for, Uncle Fred, who's running XP. This is a way to have that VM available to you so you can help that person or run the application that's really old in a VM really quickly with minimal amount of investment of your time and zero investment of your money. So that's a really great resource. And they make this available primarily to help developers, web developers, other developers who want to test their applications or their websites in different versions of Windows, because it's a wide world out there, different versions of Windows, and a developer has to make sure their application or their website works in all those versions, in all those different versions of IE and other variables like that. And so this is a great resource primarily aimed at developers and testers, but also useful to the average person.
Hey, Kurt, with that in mind, can you see my screen by chance? Is that showing up in the Hangout right now?
I can make it show up.
Yeah, I was curious I wanted to point out, since you talked about testing, that if any developers are watching, we have an interesting tool that got created on the basically consumer tech blog for Parallels, which is how much time would you save if you have all these different versions of browsers you need to run for testing a web app. And if you go to this blog post, which is called Developer Time Saving Calculator, how much time would you save? There's a little widget down here at the bottom that you can click on. Here it is. And if you click on this, it will actually prompt you through iterations of different windows and what have you that you have to test, and it will tell you how much time you could save if you could virtualize all those different versions of Windows with different browsers. That's all.
So, Skeeter, what I'm seeing is your Windows 8.1 setup that shows ready when you are, 12% complete.
Okay, I'm obviously got something. Here we go. Thank you for pointing that out, Kurt. Let me go back then. And I don't want to capture. Let's try. No, I don't want cameraman. Here we go. Now
I see your face.
Now you see me. Well, you don't want to see my face. Here we go. Try that screen. See if you see this one, Kurt.
Now I see it. Yep, perfect.
Yeah. So just to repeat this, Parallels has an interesting blog post under the Consumer Tech blog, which is blogs.parallels.com, Consumer Tech, called Developer Time Savings Calculator. And what it's designed to do is, as Kurt mentioned, if you're a web developer and you have all these different web browsers that you need to test in for an app, this little calculator tool that you can click on down here will actually give you an idea of how much time you can save if you were to virtualize all these different desktops with these different browsers. That's all.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, let me go back to my slides. Let's see if I can do that. I think those are being shared now.
Yep, you're back.
And I wanted to close by telling you of some unique features of Parallels Desktop 9 that were specifically added to make the running and the use of Windows 8 and 8.1 easier. And as Skeeter hinted earlier, it's a real start menu, and it's a feature that allows you to run Metro apps in individual windows. To show you this, let me go back to Windows 8. And here I am in the desktop. If I launch an app, for example, the Store app like this, and that's not what I wanted to see. We're going to go back and try that one more time. Maybe I launch weather. Yeah, it takes the whole screen. And this was a concern of some users because the ability to have multiple applications running simultaneously and to see those applications windows and copy and paste between them, drag and drop between them, and so on, was a real cognitive time saver. You could see what you were doing and then remember what was on the clipboard, things like this. And having only full screen apps made that a problem. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the issue here of you're on your desktop, you don't have that start menu. Let me show you what we did in Parallels Desktop 9. Here I am in Parallels Desktop 9. I will go to the desktop to make these things that are going to happen visible to you. And I'm going to go up here in my View menu, and there's a new menu item called Use Windows 7 Look. And all you have to do is click on that. And when you do, it will start a short download. And in a moment, you will have a couple of new features added to Windows 8. And this works in either an 8 or an 8.1. And this download process only takes place once, and it's not too onerous. And if you were watching really closely, you might have noticed that down here, a new icon appeared. And that icon gives me the real start menu that you know and loved from Windows 7, and it works just great. I can't tell you, for me personally, how much difference this made in the usability of Windows 8. Something as trivial as bringing up your control panels is now super easy, and in Windows 8, for me, it was actually quite hard. And if I start an application here, I can now get it in a window. And so I have that application running in a window. I can have multiple of these. I can have them all up at the same time. And that, again, was done to make things a little easier to use for a normal person who's used to Windows in the way it was in Windows 7 and Windows XP and things like this. So these two features we run in Parallels Desktop 9, and they're just a short free download for users. And again, my personal experience is they dramatically improve the usability of Windows 8. Just like for ordinary Windows apps, these so-called new Metro apps appear in the dock, and you see those over here. Here I have the store, and I have weather, and I can get these both running in their individual windows at the same time, something you can't do in Windows on a hardware PC easily without buying some additional software. So these are two things we added to Parallels Desktop to make the experience more useful and more usable to a Mac user running Windows 8 in Parallels Desktop.
Hey, Kurt, before you jump off of that, we got a couple comments and a couple questions, so let me try to bring these up.
Please.
Jason Ward wanted to make sure that we talked about the fact that there's no real start menu, and obviously you've done that. He wanted to point out that there's actually a free shell plugin apparently from Classic Shell that has, I guess it sounds like a little bit maybe of a similar kind of a look. So I want to at least give him, credit for pointing that out. And Jason, for your information, and Kurt, feel free to jump in too. What Kurt is showing is actually an add-on that is integrated right within Parallels Desktop 9 that gives you not only the start menu but the ability to run your Metro apps in that Windows interface.
So the poster is absolutely correct that there are a number of utilities for Windows 8 that gives you sort of this functionality. And what we did here at Parallels is look at all or most of those. We picked the one that we thought worked the best for our user base, and we made a deal with that company to bundle those with Parallels Desktop 9. So are you free to use anything else? Of course you are. But the Parallels Desktop 9 user, it's only a menu item that you see up here to add that functionality to your Windows 8 experience.
And you can toggle that on and off. And Kurt, as you're pointing out, for the non-technical user, this makes it just point and click easy.
Exactly. That was the goal. And so the engineering team for Parallels Desktop did the integration to make this all work. The business folks here at Parallels put together a deal with a third-party company that produced these two add-ons to Windows. And so, in my opinion, it's a win-win for Parallels users across the board.
Yeah, and Kurt, Chris Carter wanted to confirm that, is this the Start 8 from Stardock? And the answer to that, Chris, is yes, it is. And in fact, when you do install it or it comes out with an update, it will actually show their moniker associated with Parallels, so you'll see that. And Jason, just to point out, Jason thinks that our approach here is cool. So thanks for the feedback on that, Jason.
Happy to hear that. If there are no other questions, I'll continue.
That's it right now, Kurt. Go ahead.
So I showed you those features. So I wanted to let you know, just because we have a certain proportion of our installed base who still uses an older version of Parallels Desktop, that's fine. And Windows 8 and Windows 8.1 work in Parallels Desktop 8, but only for basic functionality. None of the fancy features I've showed you here, the gesture support, things like this, the integration of the Start menu add-on and the modern mix for getting modern Metro apps to run in a window, none of those are going to be there. So the best experience for a Windows 8 or 8.1 user is to use Parallels Desktop 9. And I gave you a link there so you can get more information about Parallels Desktop 9. And as you can see at the bottom here, we're quite active on a variety of social channels, and these are all excellent ways to get in contact with us, as are the forums, the support forums on the Parallels webpage. So with that, let me recap. What I think I've shown you is a number of the differences between Windows 8 and earlier versions of Windows, between Windows 8 and Windows 8.1, and how Parallels Desktop has leveraged these and added to them to provide what we think is the best experience possible for a Mac user. I didn't show many of the features that have been in Parallels Desktop from almost the beginning, like drag and drop and copy and paste support, but those all just work. That's part of the task of bringing a new operating system into Parallels Desktop 9, into Parallels Desktop that we did in the engineering work for Parallels Desktop 9. So I hope you found this useful, and as I mentioned earlier, if you're not seeing this live but rather watching it on YouTube, you can go ahead and post questions there, and Skeeter and I will do our best job to monitor those questions and get you the answers. And the one answer I owe you or one of the viewers is about the 64-bit versus 32-bit version of the modern IE VMs. I'll find that out and post that this afternoon. So Skeeter, that's it for me. I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Kurt. And just to build on what you said, we'll also put in the links of where to download not only the pre-configured virtual machine from Microsoft with Windows 8 on it, even though it's 90 days, it'll get you going, or the link directly to the how to download with the product key so that you'll have everything you need in one place here. We want to thank you for taking the time to watch this. We would love to hear feedback. We also would like to know what topics or burning questions you have about running Windows, Linux, any kind of an operating system per se within Parallels Desktop, and really how we can help hopefully expand your experience and usability of the environment. Real quickly, Chris Carter asked if we could explain about using Boot Camp for a VM base. Kurt, are you open to one more question here?
Certainly am. So just a quick review for people who aren't as familiar as the poster might be. So Boot Camp is another way to run Windows on a Mac. It's provided by Apple, so it's built into the OS. That's great. It allows you to basically choose. Do you want to run the Mac OS? Do you want to run Windows on your Mac when you start it up? And you pick one, and you're there now for the rest of your session. So that's one solution. It is free. It's built into the Mac OS. It has the disadvantage that the integration features like copy and paste support, like drag and drop support, things like that, aren't being able to run Windows and Mac apps simultaneously right next to each other on desktop. Those aren't in Boot Camp. However, if you've gone to the trouble to install and use Boot Camp, great. I want you not to lose that work. So Parallels Desktop has the ability to effectively link to the Boot Camp partition and the installed copy of Windows there, and present that to you in a virtual machine. So you get almost all of the advantages of Parallels Desktop with that approach. And if you're interested, I can tell you what things don't work, but they're really sort of small features. Drag and drop will work, copy and paste will work, and so on. And it's another way that you can use Parallels Desktop. And it's especially important if you've already installed Boot Camp and are using it, you've paid for Windows, you've got it there, it's licensed to you, and you don't want to throw that away. And so what you do is use this approach in Parallels Desktop to link to the Boot Camp partition. And that presents you that Boot Camp partition virtual Windows copy running a virtual machine. So I hope that answers your question. It's a feature built into Parallels. It's been there for a long, long time now. I use it myself, and so it's a feature you can definitely take advantage of. And if there's interest, we'd be happy to do another Hangout that specifically talks about Boot Camp, shows it, and shows advantages and disadvantages of that approach for most users.
Right.
Hope that answers your question.
Okay, well then, Kurt, let's call this a wrap. I want to thank everyone for attending today's Google Hangout on using Windows 8.1. Again, as a reminder, if you have other topics that you'd like us to see, like us to cover, we'd love to do a topic specifically to what you'd like to hear from us. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.